So I'll hand you over to you.
That's okay. That's okay. Right. I'll try and keep to the time because I know you're probably getting a little restless and you're wanting your lunch. I studied with Malcolm Willis at university. He was my tutor, and he was inspirational, to be honest. I studied animal science, and about a third of my degree was in genetics. General genetics of all sorts of animals. But obviously, having shown dogs since I was about this big, I had an interest in the genetics of dachshunds, both in coat colour, coat type, and everything else in between, the diseases that they pass on. And I get asked all the time to either help people with the colours of their puppies, or somebody will see a litter advertised on Facebook and tag me in something and go, "This doesn't sound quite right, can you explain?" And I'm fascinated by it. I started looking at the colours, well, when I started breeding. I started out with standard longs, which, to be honest, come in red and black and tan. We don't have a lot of the fancy colours that we see in the mini longs particularly, and more in the mini smooths. We shouldn't be breeding for colour. That's the bottom line. We should be breeding for health and temperament and breed type. The colour should be incidental.
Absolutely.
And anybody who is just breeding for one colour, please ask yourselves, are you looking at health and temperament first? Because that is far more important than anything I'm going to tell you now. Yes, there are some health issues linked to certain colours and certain patterns, but really you should be breeding for nothing else other than health, temperament and breed type. And you get whatever colours come out of that. And if it's not the colour you particularly like, tough, to be perfectly honest, because you should be breeding A little bit of background about the breed. 2 sizes, 3 in the SCI countries, 3 coat types, 3 base colours, and I'll talk to you about what that means in a second, 3 modifying colours, 4 patterns, which gives us 216 different possible combinations. Now, some of the varieties, and I apologise to those people that only have, say, standard wires or something like that, because a lot of what I'm going to talk about probably doesn't apply to you at the moment. And I say at the moment because we are seeing a lot of imports coming in with colours that we haven't traditionally had in the UK. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad thing, but we just need to take that into account if those are coming into varieties that we haven't seen them in before. People need to be very aware of what's in their pedigree and what is behind the dogs they're bringing in. So, coat colour in Dachshunds is controlled by at least 7 different genes. And all Dachshunds have all 7 of these genes. Just depends which version they have as to whether you see that colour or you don't see that colour. In genetics speak, we call a version of a gene an allele. I'm going to try and keep the science speak to a minimum, so apologies to those who have studied it a little bit and will understand some of the terms, but I'm kind of going for a mid-ground here and hoping that everybody keeps up. The way those 7 genes interact gives us the colours and patterns that we see in our dogs. And understanding these genes and how they work gives us the potential to predict, in most cases, the colours of the puppies that we're going to breed. And that will enable us to make sure we don't produce any with the associated health problems, because there are a couple of colours that we need to be really careful with. So, the base colours. Red. Okay, red is the most dominant colour in Dachshunds. Okay, even in wires. And I'll come on to the colours in wires in a little bit, because that's the varieties that there's been the least research done into the genetics of coat colour. But there is red. And it varies from these 3, which are all clear reds, to heavily shaded reds, which we'll talk about in a minute. But they're all red. They have the base colour of red. Black, which comes in all 3 varieties, all 3 coat types, and chocolate. Okay. And I have used different pictures. A lot of them are on there, they're mine, because I'm quite happy with being shown and things to show the colours. And some people have very generously allowed me to use photos of their dogs for purpose of showing certain things. So they're the 3 base colours. And they're the ones that we know exactly how they're inherited, exactly how they're passed on, and how they interact together. So if you breed 2 chocolates together, you will only get chocolates unless they have one of the modifying genes as well, which I'll talk about in a second. If you breed 2 blacks together, you will get blacks or you'll get chocolates. And there's also one gene that's a bit of a, I don't want to say a rogue gene, but it's one that pops up occasionally. I'll talk about a bit later. If you breed 2 reds together, you can get any colour because they can carry other colours recessively and pass them on. So although you see the red coat colour, they can pass on black and they can pass on chocolate as well. The modifying colours, in mini longs and occasionally in mini smooths, we have a modifying colour of cream. And what that does is it dilutes the coat colour. It's not a dilution gene in the same way as other dilution genes, but it affects the intensity of the red colour. So the base colour will still be red, but because it's got 2 copies of the cream gene as well, it comes out as cream. And it will also affect a black and tan dog and change it to black and cream, or a chocolate and tan dog and change it to chocolate and cream. And we only see cream, I say, mainly in the mini longs. There has been a few cases recently of cream mini smooths. I'd be interested to see a genetic analysis done on those dogs to see exactly what they are and where it's come from. I'm not saying there's anything dodgy been done with those pedigrees or anything like that, but to actually see whether it is the cream we see in mini longs, the only way you would know would be to do a DNA test on them. If you make 2 creams together, you will only get creams. Okay? If you suddenly get a red puppy come out that's properly red, then one of the parents isn't a true cream. So if you make, I've got some pictures of creams here. Okay, so the dog at the top right, he is cream. He's very definitely cream. The black and cream is his mother. Okay, so he will only produce cream if he was mated to another cream. Okay, he shows the true pigment on either a red or a cream dog, in that he's got black nose, black irons, and black nails, and black pads. I've particularly shown that picture of him because you can see his front pads. And he comes, so that's his mother up there, the black and cream bitch, and his father is the same colour as he is. So I knew when I did that mating, all I would get was black and creams and cream puppies. Okay. I know that those particular ones didn't have anything, any chocolates or anything else in the line. The chocolate and cream bitch at the bottom came from 2 black and tan parents, and I'll talk about that a bit later. Okay? But she's very definitely cream markings. You can tell she's not tan markings, it's very definitely a cream markings. That was her at about 12 weeks old. The other modifier is the bit of the rogue gene that I was talking about before. And it's called E-red. Some of you may or may not have heard of it. Occasionally, people will make 2 black and tans together and they'll get a red puppy. And it's not just red, it looks orange at birth. We see them in the mini longs and the mini smooths. I don't know whether they're seen in the wires or not, I'm afraid. And initially, when people got them, they'd say, that's not possible. You don't get that colour from these parents. But what this gene is, it's a separate gene entirely, and it masks all black on the dog, apart from on the pigment, apart from on the nose, the nails and the pads. So these puppies are born, and I've got a picture of them on the next one, I'll come back in a second. This was a litter of puppies, a friend of mine bred them. Black and tan mother, chocolate dapple father, and they were the puppies. There was some clearly silver dapples, there was a black and tan, and then there were these which look orange, okay, to be honest. Their noses went black, their nails were black, their pads are black, but what they are genetically, who knows, unless they're DNA tested, because they will still have a base colour that will either be black or chocolate. But this E gene has masked all the black and chocolate hairs, so they could be anything. They could also be dapples. And without a DNA test, you don't know what they are. So we've got 1 or 2 lines in the mini longs in the UK that carry this gene, and I believe 1 or 2 mini smooth lines as well. So if you do breed a litter, when you're only expecting blacks and chocolates, whether they've got dapples or not is irrelevant, and you suddenly get this bright red puppy, then it's likely that it's an E-red, and there is a DNA test for this. So you know whether your dog is a carrier of this gene or not if you choose to test them. So it's caused by a recessive red gene. Okay, normally in Dachshunds, red is dominant to everything else. But this is a recessive red gene. And it masks all eumelanin, which is the black hair pigment in dogs. Okay, that's the name of it. So the dog may be genetically black or chocolate, but this recessive red gene overrides it. Both parents must carry it to produce a puppy with it. It also masks dapple and brindle. And this is why, if you're breeding from dapples and you get puppies like this, you really must DNA test them for the dapple gene, because otherwise we can get problems further on if those puppies are then bred. Okay. The other dilute, and these are not acceptable colours in the UK, and they are our blues and our Isabellas. If a Dachshund has 2 copies of the dilution gene, 1 from each parent, then any black or chocolate hairs will be diluted to blue or Isabella. Some dilute Dachshunds suffer from something called colour dilution alopecia, which is abbreviated to CDA, and associated problems. And I say some, because there will be people in here who maybe have them, or have known of them, or have heard of them, and people will swear blind they don't have problems. Maybe they don't, because some don't have any problems. And there is one theory, and I strongly say it's a theory. There is no DNA test to prove it as far as I know. I'm going to be contacting some labs this week to ask whether we can do some trials on it. That there are actually 3 versions of the dilution gene. Most Dachshunds have capital D, which means non-dilution. Okay, so hopefully all mine have the non-dilution gene. So they have normal red, black and tan, and chocolate coloration. Then there is the little d, which is for dilution, and that changes it to blue or Isabella. And then there's this DL version of it. And that is the version of dilution with CDA. And if a dog has 1 copy of this DL version, it will have mild symptoms of CDA. If it's got 2 copies of it, then it will have a severe form of CDA. And I'll show you what CDA looks like in a second. Unfortunately, in Dachshunds, we think we have this DL version of the gene, as well as the D version of the gene. And as there is no DNA test for it, the advice is don't breed blues and Isabellas. Because if you are breeding a colour where there is a known problem associated with that colour, and you don't explain that in full details to any puppy buyers, they have come back on you as a breeder if they then have massive vet bills trying to deal with the problems. Yes, puppy owners should go out and do their own research, but as breeders, we have to be responsible, and we shouldn't be breeding for these colours. Yeah.
Can colour dilution and alopecia have anything to do with black hair follicular dysplasia?
Yes, it's a very similar thing as well.
So are they inherited in the same way?
I would need to double check, but I would suspect so. So some breeds where they have blues, where they don't have any problems, and some breeds like Weimaranas that are all Isabellas, they don't have these problems with colour dilution alopecia. But that isn't enough weight for me to say that we should go ahead and breed blues and Isabellas, okay? Because it's just too much risk. Here's some pictures of a blue and an Isabella to show the difference. They're both puppies, and their coats look pretty normal. These are both long-haired. Okay, there's an Isabella at the top, and blue at the bottom. The blue at the bottom isn't suffering as badly. It's got hair loss on the bottom of its ears. But if you compare that to a black and tan or a red mini long, you'll see a massive difference in the amount of coat that they have. The Isabella at the top has got no hair at all on its ears. It looks almost like a smooth, but it is definitely a long-haired. I didn't want to include pictures of the severe form of it, where they have massive skin infections, increased likelihood of skin cancers, and associated infections, repeated infections that require constant vet treatment. In my book, no colour is worth breeding for that risk. No matter how much people want them or request them or think that they're attractive, no colour is worth those health risks. I will try and find out, and as soon as I find out whether there is a DNA test, I will put information on the Breed Council website about that, if I can find any labs that offer that. Yeah.
My mother used to breed toy poodles years ago. We bred blacks, and we had a blue turn up in the litter, and it was basically
Yeah.
and by the time it was a year old, it was put down with its immune system was so terrible. It's got everything.
They do have these colour dilution alopecia problems in other breeds as well. Poodles, I know, suffer from that, and they also have other problems as well. Dobermans have colour dilution alopecia, and some others. There are some breeds that don't have problems, and maybe they just don't have the version that causes this. Okay, so I will try and find out a bit more. Okay, patterns. Dachshunds have a base colour, and we have to remember what that base colour is before we think about how any of the patterns affect it. And Dachshunds can have one or more of these patterns at the same time. Okay, because they're all separate genes, they can all be sort of turned on in the same dog, if you like. And they're caused by different genes, and they're all passed on in slightly different ways. So dapple, which in other breeds is known as merle, is a dominant gene. You only need one copy of it from one parent to be a dapple. So if you have a dapple, and it clearly is a dapple, then you should only ever mate it to a solid colour. That is definitely a solid colour. Okay? Traditionally, breeders would have advised you to only mate a dapple to a black and tan or a chocolate and tan. Because, and I suspect, because before DNA testing, if you looked at a red or a cream dapple, you cannot tell that it's a dapple. They are really, really hard to distinguish, and I'll show you some pictures in a second. The Kennel Club will not accept registrations where both parents are dapple, because of the problems of producing a double dapple puppy and the health problems with that, which I'll talk about in a second.
Do you know when that actually came into force? Was it quite recently? Because I was told that 2015 there was two solid parents, and they registered dapple from them.
Okay, so
2015 born, so I think that's
if the certainly you can't register puppies if there's two dapple parents. I would need to check with the Kennel Club whether their computer system flags up a dapple occurring when both parents are supposedly solid.
That's worrying.
Okay. We have several people who keep a very close eye on the Breed Record supplement, and if we see anything odd appear, we do refer it to the Kennel Club, and then it's up to them what they choose to do. Sometimes things might slip through the net, but in that case, either the parents weren't what they said they were, or one was a cream or red dapple, because you can't get a dapple unless one parent is. Okay. It would need testing to prove one way or the other.
A good example of that is friends of ours had a solid red but had one light red hair.
Yeah.
They tested it and came up with dapple.
Yeah, absolutely. The dapple gene is a bit like if you've got a pot of paint and a brush and you flicked it at that wall. It is completely random where the dapple pattern happens on the dog. Some of them get the lovely mottled colour all over them, which is really attractive. Others get a tiny little splash that's hardly noticeable. And particularly on reds and creams, which are so hard to see whether they are or not, if you know you've got one dapple parent and you're not certain about the puppies, you should be DNA testing them, because they should be registered correctly and they should go to their new owners with the new owners knowing what they are. And if in doubt, you need to test. Yeah.
Is the homozygous form of the dapple a different colour to the dapple?
Yes, and I'll talk about that in a second, and why we do not allow puppies where there's both dapple parents to be registered. I've got a very extreme example in a second. Yeah.
Can you say that it's like throwing paint at the wall? Is there any way you can breed for heavier or lighter, or is it just literally
No, completely random. You can breed a beautifully marked dapple with even markings all over it, and you can get one with a tiny splodge on its head, or you can get ones which, on the silver dapples, particularly mini longs, you get some that don't have any nice crisp markings and they fade to like a grey colour all the way over, and like really dark dapples, and it is really difficult to predict it. And that's probably why we don't see as many in the show ring, because for the show ring we want a really nice, evenly marked dapple, because that's what the colour says in the breed standard. You know, they should be evenly marked all over. So some people will show them if they're slightly mismarked and they've only got a bit of a patch of them, but it would depend on the quality of the dog. And colour is the last thing you should be looking at in the show ring.
Now, I was just wondering if you went from almost black, whole-coloured dog with a small amount, are you less likely to get spotted?
No, not at all. Doesn't work like that at all. It is completely random. Okay, moving on to brindle. This isn't the brindle that we use to describe the colour in wires. Okay, I will briefly talk about that. This is the tiger striped brindle that we see in smooths and longs. And it's a dominant gene. One parent must be brindle to produce a brindle. It's absolutely fine to have both parents as brindle. There is no health problems associated with having more brindle stripes or anything like that. And as far as I know, having two copies of the gene doesn't make it more stripy than others. I think it's just the way it works. So there's no health problems with it, and that will work on any base colour. So if it's a red base colour, you'll get red brindle. If it's cream, you'll get cream brindles. If it's black and tan, you'll get black and tan brindles, but you only see the brindling on the tan points. Okay, so you don't see it on the black. So there's a question at the back, and then I'll come to you. Yeah?
How can you get a brindle from parents that aren't showing brindle?
You can't. They might only have a very slight brindle markings, but they will still be brindle. So
you can, because I'm not talking about vaccines actually, I'm talking about another breed. But
right, and what breeds work differently?
They were. What do you mean? The brindle's not
Yes.
dominant in another breed?
Yes.
It's not dominant.
Yes. So I'm trying to think which breed it is. There is, in Dachshunds it's a dominant gene, in some of the breeds it's a recessive gene. I think in Afghans it's a recessive gene. So you can breed two non-brindles and get a brindle. They might be, they could well be. But in Dachshunds it's definitely a dominant gene.
Right, so it isn't a full, so it's not universally a dominant gene.
No, definitely not. Great Danes it's not. That's the other one I know. It's definitely not. Yeah.
So if you've got a black brindle,
Yeah.
she will carry that in,
Yes.
but not necessarily have brindle pups.
Depends what you breed her to. So if you bred her to a non-brindle, every puppy has a 50% chance of being brindle or not. And it depends whether the pups are red or black and tan, whether they're black and tan brindle or red brindle.
So it can't hide like the...
No. No. The only way it can hide is if the E gene, the recessive red gene, is also factoring in, because that will mask any black hairs. So what it would do is you just wouldn't see the stripes. So that E gene, but that E gene is quite rare in the UK population. It's not a common gene. So it's, we know with mini longs it's down maybe one particular bloodline. Mini smooths, I'm not quite so sure how many bloodlines it's in. Now, shading. It's not strictly a pattern. It's a version of the red gene, and it exists in at least 3 versions in Dachshunds. And depending on the version determines if it's recessive or dominant. So the red base colour will be there, but the amount of shading varies. And I've got another slide that tells that. The other pattern we've got is piebald. Again, not an acceptable colour in the UK. It's a recessive gene, so both parents must carry it or be piebald themselves to produce it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So, dapple. I did talk quite a bit about this a few minutes ago, and I'm conscious of the time, so I'm trying to rattle through. I have got most of this on a handout to give you all at the end, so don't worry, you will get copies of most of this. So, what the dapple gene does, it lightens random sections of the coat to a lighter colour, leaving patches of the original colour remaining. Patches can be any size, and can be located anywhere on the dog, and the edges of the patches may appear jagged or torn. It's very much a random pattern. And it only affects eumelanin, which is the black or chocolate pigment. So dappling, that's why it's so hard to see on reds and creams. That means that any black, liver, blue or Isabella in the coat, eyes or nose can be dappled. And the red pigment is not affected at all and will appear as normal, which is why you can see in that chocolate dapple the tan points. Okay, the tan points are never dappled. It's only ever the main base colour. We should really be describing dapples by their true base colour first and just adding dapple to the end. So it should be chocolate and tan dapple, or black and tan dapple, or black and cream dapple, or chocolate and cream dapple, to be completely correct. But traditionally in Dachshunds we've called them silver dapple and chocolate dapple. And it's just a tradition thing. We really should be calling a black and tan dapple or chocolate and tan dapple to make it completely correct. And those options are on the registration list for colours, which we would encourage people to use rather than silver dapple. Because we need to know the colour of the points as well. Brindle, there's a cream brindle mini long. It causes black or chocolate stripes to appear on any red, tan or cream pigmented area. Cream brindles with chocolate stripes look a bit strange. They don't look as attractive as the one with a nice black pigment. It's a dominant gene, so one parent must brindle to get a brindle puppy. And as in dapple, the amount of brindling is random. Okay, some get lots, some get very little. Shading. So the red colour in Dachshunds is controlled by, confusingly, a gene called the sable gene, which isn't sable as we would traditionally describe it in Dachshunds, which is a very heavy black overlay with a traditional widow's peak point on the head. And if Dachshunds have just one copy of the AY gene, they will be red base colour, regardless of anything else. Okay? AY is clear sable, or you call it clear red, with no black hairs on it. And a version of this gene exists which produces some black or chocolate shading, and another version which produces extensive shading. And the next slide shows some pictures of some standard longs. So the bitch at the top left is a clear red. The dog, bottom right, is the heaviest shading that we get, that probably traditionally would have been called sable. He's got very definite widow's peak. And in the middle is actually their daughter, which is kind of halfway between. And then we've also got the one at the bottom left, which just shows a little bit of black on the ears, but that's still shaded. So he would still be registered as a shaded red because he's got some black on it. The only time you should be using just red is if they are properly clear red. And that occurs in all varieties. Now, for those wire breeders in here, it is thought that the majority of wires are actually the heaviest shaded red. And it's called wild boar. And if you look at them, they tend to have tan pores, and then their body coat is like a dark grey black colour, and if you lift it up it will have red coat underneath. And traditionally that's been called brindle. But the thought is, if you DNA tested them, they would come out as having that version of the red gene. Which I think people are nodding in the audience, so I'm hoping that I'm not, I'm talking the right thing. We also see black and tans, clear reds, and some of them have been called red brindle, which isn't strictly true because there's no stripes on them. But that is what we see, and we see a variety in the wire coats in terms of colour, in the same way as we see a variety in the shade of reds in longs and smooths. So it's probably likely that it is that. There is some theories that it might also be another gene called the chinchilla gene, which has nothing to do with chinchillas, that's probably come from the terrier input, which would give that sort of pepper and salt colour, which hopefully makes sense to marvellous. That's good. Okay. Piebald, not an acceptable colour in the UK, as the brief standard says white is not permissible, except for a small patch on the chest. It's caused by a recessive gene, so both parents must be piebald or carry piebald to produce it. Having one copy of the piebald gene may cause them to have white tips to the toes and tail in some dogs. So if any of you have looked at American sites, and you might see it's showing for piebald, they probably mean it's got one copy of it, and it's just got white bits on its paws and its tail. We don't see them over here as much, so what we know about them over here is less detail. Any base colour can have the piebald pattern, and all the patterns can exist on the same dog. So you can have a dapple, brindle, piebald dog. Okay? What they look like is another matter. But we do see some mini longs with both dapple and brindle, and the brindle's only showing up on the tan points. They look a bit lucky, like they need a good wash, in my opinion. And piebald, you do see quite a lot of dapple piebalds. The next slide shows you some pictures of some piebalds. They're American dogs. They are all American champions. There is.
What does the FCI standard say?
Oh, they wouldn't be allowed at all.
Well, then, in my opinion, they are not allowed.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why we don't allow them here in the showroom. Well, there is no doubt they are Dachshunds. Well, there is a lot of evidence from the very earliest Dachshunds that Dachshunds did exist in this pattern. It's a traditional hound colour. And there is a lot of evidence from the very early texts that there were red and white Dachshunds, and for whatever reason they disappeared, and it's not part of the current standard either here or in FCI countries. I'm sorry, I'll find a better picture. Yes, exactly. The amount of white on a piebald tends to be more uniform than a dapple. So I get a lot of questions, is this a double dapple, which I'll talk about in a second, or is it a piebald? The answer, 9 times out of 10 in the UK, is it's a double dapple, because we have so few of these, and the people who have imported them you can probably count on one hand, and they're really not very good examples, and they're just not taken off at all. And because it's a recessive gene, they're going to have to import more than one to produce this colour regularly. There are no health problems associated with it. So people could legitimately breed them. They don't fit the breed standard, but they're not producing health problems. So, you know, that's down to their own consciousness. Thank you. Conscience. Whether they, you know, they're breeding for the breed standard or not.
Can I just ask?
Yes.
All these have dark hairs. If the white did go over the faces, could there be ear and eye problems?
There is, in any white dog, there is a higher incidence of deafness in dogs that have white ears. Because it affects the hairs inside the ear as well, and means that they're not going to pass on the sound waves so much. So potentially, they could have a higher incidence of deafness. However, that applies to any dog with white on it. Yes?
A lot of times the markings stay where they are when you breed them, don't they? They
Yeah.
don't move around like a daffodil.
No. So they tend to be almost symmetrical. You can certainly see on the wire, it's a very symmetrical look. And I've shown both of these. You can have ticking on them, which is what the mini long's got. It's called Irish ticking. And as I said, I can see the attractiveness of them as a pet. Okay, I'm not going to start breeding them. I don't want to import them, but I can see why people would want that. Okay, patterns and health. Double dapple, that's where both parents are a dapple. If they are, each puppy in a litter has a 25% chance of being a double dapple. So 75% chance of not being a double dapple. But the Kennel Club in our country thinks it's far too much of a risk, so they won't allow registrations where both parents are. Double dapples can have severe sight and hearing problems, missing small eyes, and internal deformities. And because of those health risks, you should just not be breeding two dapples together. It's far too dangerous. Hidden dapples. Not a health issue in themselves. You get a cream dapple or a red dapple, they're perfectly healthy in the same way as a silver dapple or a chocolate dapple would be. However, because they're so hard to identify, they could inadvertently be mated to another dapple and then produce double dapples. And that's why, before the days of DNA testing, traditional breeders would have said you don't breed your dapples to your reds and your creams. Because if you get a cream dapple or a red dapple, you might then breed it to another one and get the problems. We now have a DNA test for the Merle gene. It's very easy and fairly cheap to test your puppies, so that should never need to happen. And there are some breeders, very sensibly, who every puppy they get in a dapple litter, in a litter where one parent is dapple, they will test them, even if they look like a black and tan. They will still test just to make sure. Okay? Yes, some of you may go, well, I endorse all my puppies, so it doesn't matter. That actually doesn't stop anybody breeding from them, it just stops them registering the puppies. So if you are being really responsible, you will make sure you know what colour your puppies are before they go to their new homes. Noddy's an extreme double dapple. Most don't have quite as much white as he is. He was born completely white, apart from some black pigment on his nose. He's completely blind. His eyes are small and deformed. He's also completely deaf. That's why we don't do it. Because you can't predict, just like you can't predict how much dapple pattern you're going to get, you breed a double dapple, you can't predict how much white they're going to have. And the problems. And it's just not worth it. You know, we have a responsibility to ensure the health of our puppies as much as we can. And this is a really easy way of making sure that doesn't happen. It's just don't breed them. Hidden dapples. Reds and creams often don't show the dapple patterning. So it should be tested. And the cream dog at the bottom is a cream dapple. Can't see any dappling on him. You certainly wouldn't know. Maybe in some lights you might see a little bit of difference, but is that shading or not? I certainly can't tell from that picture. The litter of puppies at the top I was sent a link to this last year. Some of you on some of the groups might recognise it. I have asked permission that I can show it. Mum's a silver apple, Dad's cream. And the breeder was saying, I've got 3 beautiful cream puppies. And I got tagged in it saying, you know, what do you think? And I said, well, personally, I DNA test them. And I looked at them, and I said, I think one of them's a dapple, from looking at that picture, with my magnifying glass, on my computer screen, that far away from them. Thankfully, I was right, but I think that was more my luck than judgment, because the dapple puppy is actually the darker of the 3. You can just make out a few darker patches on him if you look really closely. That was a week old, if that. He now looks cream. You can't tell. He looks like any other cream that you would see. The other 2 are not dapples. Okay, she DNA tested them after I gave her the advice, and the results came back pretty quickly. And she now knows. She's now got far more information about it. She's included dapple information in her puppy pack to her new puppy owners. And, you know, it's one of the success stories of one of the Facebook groups, to be honest, because there's now another breeder who knows more about it. Predicting the colour of your puppies. This is the fun bit, really. What you need to know is what genes both parents have, either by DNA testing them. You can test currently for black, chocolate, red, merle, brindle, dilute. There isn't a test for cream at the moment. And there is a test for piebald. Okay, so you can get a full colour screen for your dog if you so wanted to. You can do it by trial and error. You can do it by pedigree analysis if you are certain of the colours behind your dog. And they are only as good as the people who bred their dog and put on the registration papers. Because until we had the drop-down menu on the Kennel Club online registration system, people could put any colour they wanted on the registration. So, not so long ago we used to get mahogany, coffee, caramel, all sorts of weird and wonderful colours. And it makes pedigree analysis very difficult. There's people who genuinely don't know what colour the puppies are, and they'll register reds as chocolates because they're brown. You know? And people should know, but you know, some people genuinely make a mistake and they're not sure what colour their puppies are. And if they don't have a mentor, if you like, explaining to them and helping them, or advising them, or they don't put pictures on Facebook for people to comment on, then they are working blind and they go for the best shot. And they're not doing it through any sign of malice or anything like that. They just don't know. And it's kind of our job to educate them as much as we can in a polite and informative way. There's been one on recently. Some of you I know have seen it. A litter, supposedly mum was black and tan, supposedly dad was chocolate and tan. It's never happened. Dad's not the dad, in my opinion. It's got a bit nasty the last couple of days with one particular post. The puppy, there's 2 puppies in the litter that are fairly dark shaded red, but they also have very domed skulls and very funny ear shapes. And she happens to own a red chihuahua. I would like to say that that's my opinion. Maybe the chocolate tan dog did later and some of the puppies are like him. I don't think these 2 red ones are. But I have advised your DNA tests. We need to know which colour pattern is dominant to the other, so we need a bit of education. And once you've worked out possibilities, you need to know the chance of each puppy being that colour. So, picture the top right is my bit. She's black and tan. Her mum was black and tan. Her dad was silver dapple, but she's definitely black and tan. And I mated her to a black and tan dog, who was out of black and tan by red. And I wanted a black and tan litter, because that's my preferred colour. I don't particularly breed for colour, but I did this mating, it worked on paper, you know, everything was right. And these were my pups, and the chocolate came out first. And I always told her, 3 o'clock in the morning when I'd been sat up with her for a few hours, I always told her what she could do with the chocolate. However, they had 2 black and tans, a black and cream, and a chocolate and cream. The cream was even worse in my opinion, because we thought of chocolate and cream on the same dog, but never mind. So from that though, it now means that I actually know the DNA profile of both of those, because they produce the chocolate and cream, which is recessive for chocolate and for cream. So both parents must carry those 2 genes. So actually, it gave me lots of information. It wasn't what I wanted, but having not done that, I wouldn't have had a clue that any of the other puppies might carry chocolate. Whereas now, at least I go, oh, actually, both parents carry it, so therefore, I can start making some more predictions. So from that, we get this long line of letters, and I'll explain briefly what they mean. I'm not going to go too much, because I know the ladies in the kitchen are wanting to start serving lunch and things like that. So, capital B is black, okay, that's the colour we see. It overrides the little b, which is the chocolate gene. But they must carry that little b to produce the chocolate, okay, so both parents were that. They both had tan markings, so they're this version of the red gene, AT. That means they have tan markings, but they're not a red-based colour. This II gene means that they must both have 1 copy of the intensity gene. This is the one we don't have a test for at the moment, which causes cream. And that's changed the tan points to cream points on 2 of the puppies. I'm hoping they don't have either the dilution gene, which causes blue or Isabella. I'm hoping they don't have the recessive red, but I can't actually tell from the puppies that were produced. Okay, so that's guesswork. They're not dapple, so they've got the, for those people who know a bit of science, the homozygous recessive version of the dapple gene. And there's no brindle, okay? I highlighted them in red because they're the ones that are guesswork. So, looking at that, each puppy, and this is where it comes into it, this isn't what I got in my litter. Every single puppy has this chance. 75% chance of being black and 25% chance of being chocolate. Or 3 out of 4 or 1 out of 4 if you want to do it as fractions. 100% chance of having tan points, and they won't be red. They won't have a red base colour. 75% chance of having tan points, 25% chance of having cream points, no chance of being a dilute, no chance of being an E-red, no chance of being a dapple, and no chance of being a brindle. Putting that all together, to get a chocolate and cream puppy, there was a 1 in 16 chance of her occurring. Okay? And I happened to get 1 in a litter of 4. Okay? It's random. It's like tossing a coin. Okay? You could toss a coin 5 times and get 5 heads, or 5 tails. Okay? You have to work out the probability for every single puppy. And it would only be if that bitch and that dog together produced hundreds of puppies that you would get the percentages that we talk about. Okay? Because they are just chance. Okay? Like sticking your hand into a bag and which ball are you going to pull out? What colour is it going to be? Okay? If there's 5 balls, you've got 1 in 5 chance of getting it. And it is random. Okay? So, I happily help people work out colours of puppies and predictions and things like that. It never bothers me. You might need to give me a couple of days to get back to you because I work full-time. I'm a science teacher. For the next 2 weeks, I'm off. So if anyone's got any questions, different timing. So hopefully, for those that had very little knowledge, that's given you a bit of knowledge. I haven't gone into too much higher scientific level. I think from a lot of comments that I've got, I think I need to write a book.
I think so too.
But there is a leaflet that goes through all this, and I'm on Facebook and a lot of Facebook groups, so please do ask me questions and tag me and ask me over lunch and things like that. Yes?
The black and tan pots that you have at Italy,
Yeah.
so are they 66% possible het for the cream gene?
Yes. So neither of them, oh no, in fact one of them was bred from, and she did produce a cream puppy. He's called Womble, some of you may know Womble on the Facebook groups. And so yeah, so I know at least one of them carries cream. The other one was in Pure Pet Home, she's not been bred. The black and cream in the litters actually sat in a cage at the back of the room, and the chocolate and creams got put away, because I kept them. Because I didn't want to sell the chocolate and cream, because I didn't trust them with that, to be honest. Yes?
We had our first listen last year, black and tan Brindle boy to a shady cream girl.
Yep.
And we've got 2 black and cream Brindle boys and 1 shady cream girl. Was there no Brindle in the girls? You said the Brindle's got a dominant gene, or was that just...
No, it's completely random. If one parent is brindle, every puppy has a 50% chance of being a brindle. And that is purely the toss of a coin.
Yeah.
They either get it or they don't. Yeah.
Is there a homozygous form of brindle?
Not in Dachshunds. Oh, well, yeah, there's a homozygous dominant,
Yeah,
so both
you
parents
have
are, but you wouldn't see any difference in what you looked at.
Yeah, but if you mated that, when you colour with that...
Only produce brindles. Yeah. So if you've got a homozygous dominant brindle, it will only ever produce brindle puppies, regardless of what it's made
But
of.
it's not visually different from the other brindle.
No. Yeah.
You haven't spoken too much about brindle wires.
Yep.
You mentioned AY might be. Is there a test for it? I mean, is there a...
You can test for the red gene and the AY version of that. And there are tests. There are tests for the chinchilla gene for other breeds, which the company might be prepared to offer. But my gut feeling, after looking at this for quite a while, is if it's got tan paws, which a lot of brindle wires do have, it will be a shade of red.
So what about, I've got a red
Yeah.
and English thrown puppies, which when they're born,
Yeah.
basically look like a shade of red.
Yeah.
And some of them clear right off,
Yeah.
and some of them don't.
That's exactly the same in a lot of pets. Yeah.
Shade red.
Yeah, I've got Lyttrostantalons at the moment, and they all look shaded red. But within that, you can see different variations. And I know some are going to end up heavily shaded as adults, and some are going to end up very lightly shaded as adults. And they'll all probably go through a stage where they've hardly got any shading on them, and then it'll come back. And the older they get, the more it gets in standard
When you come to breeding,
Yeah.
There's a difference when you come to breeding those, whether you'll get shady reds or true reds, if you like.
You would need.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, you would need to test for them. And one of the problems is if they've just got one copy of the AY gene and then an AT gene, so they would carry the black and tan. There's just such a huge range in the shading, and again, it's a random amount.
A lot of the reds on the continent are much clearer and much redder than what
Yes.
we have in this country.
And they will probably breed them to black and tans that are true black and tans. We don't have as many true black and tan wires in this country. They tend to be like the really dark shaded red dog that so go back to that one. They tend to be more like that. So you'll get one that looks black and tan, but as it gets older, it's got some red on its ears. So it probably isn't a true black and tan. Whereas there are one or two, the true black and tan, and if you breed that to a clear red, then you're likely to only get reds and black and tans. Likely. Not guaranteed, but likely. I need to do a bit more looking at the white, to be honest.
Can we thank Helen very much for